As you can see on my screen, we're going to be talking about Ben Shapiro. Now, this is one of his more viral videos. This one is from 6 years ago, a long time ago. But it's his most viewed video on the Daily Wire's YouTube channel. If you're unfamiliar with him, he's a far-right political pundit. He's a talking head. He's the type of person that comes up with propagandistic arguments. And I wanted to look at this video because the title, as you can see, is Ben Shapiro Destroys Transgenderism and Pro-Abortion Argument. So I was going through this video listening and found it's just a prime example of how propaganda is formulated and why debates are really just charisma contests. So I want to give this video a listen. It's like 10 minutes long or something. We're going to step through it minute by minute and see what they have to say here. So he's about to, quote-unquote, debate just some random person in the audience. While we listen to Ben Shapiro spread his nutter buttery all over everything, we're also going to play Tears of the Kingdom. It's Zelda, Breath of the Wild 2. So, yeah, it'll be in the background. Shouldn't bother you too much if you're unfamiliar with it. Let's listen to how he formulates his propaganda here.
How do you say that some people don't have privilege when you basically just said that trans people aren't valid? They're not a thing. They're just girls pretending to be boys or boys pretending to be girls.
So basically the question, if you couldn't hear, it's hard to make out. The question was, how can you possibly justify, basically, the position that trans people are invalid, for lack of a better term?
Okay. Oh, someone's excited. Okay.
Biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So.
Okay, you see what he did there? This is what I'm talking about. This is the exact thing. Listen closely. This is how he propagandizes.
Biological, but gender is a completely different thing.
No.
So gender and sex are completely different things definitionally. When we're talking about sex and gender, we're not talking about the same thing. When we talk about gender, we're talking about the social aspects or how we express our identity. The sex that we are is like a biological thing. To listen to how he morphs what she just said. She said, they're two different things. They're not the same thing. That's true. We define them differently. Quick interjection. I won't take long. I just wanted to tell you guys, YouTube's algorithm operates off of a few factors. Watch time, whether or not you subscribe, and whether or not you like something. So if you really want to help my channel, I would appreciate it if you guys watch the video to the end. If you don't watch it to the end, just watch a little bit longer than you would have otherwise. I would appreciate that very much. All right, let's get back to the video.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So.
That's not what she said. She didn't say gender is disconnected from sex. She said they're different things. Gender is actually connected to sex. In almost every case, except for a very few exceptions, your gender and your sex are probably going to match. But there are cases in which they don't. And that is a biological reality. Whether Ben Shapiro wants to accept that fact of reality or not is irrelevant to me, really. We can look at brains of people and see how they're different. See how they match up with different types of people more closely. Trans people exist. It's a reality of the world, whether he likes that or not. Obviously, he doesn't. The point here is sex is connected to gender in almost every case. Your gender will match your sex in almost every case. Not every case. But what he just said is something that pretty much every human being alive can agree with. They are connected to each other.
Biological, but gender is a complete...
See, this is why debates are charisma contests. It's not based on intelligence or facts or any of that. It's based on who can be the most charismatic in any given moment. That's it. This is why I don't debate people, ever. I mean, I'd be open to having conversations with pretty much anybody, but debates really are just charisma contests. It's all about who can be the most charming and who can come up with the quickest witted retort to something that's been said.
Different thing.
No, gender is not disconnected from sex. So
It's not completely disconnected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society.
And she tried to point that out. No, they're not disconnected, but gender is a cultural thing. It's the cultural aspect to it. That's correct, what she's saying. But Ben Shapiro has a microphone and is the most respected person in this situation. I mean, he is holding this video up as a piece of evidence that he knows what he's talking about better than anybody. He destroys transgenderism, quote unquote, in this video. All right, let's step back and listen to it again.
Connected, but it's still a cultural thing. It's still from society. It's
okay, no, it is not in the mind.
Yes, it is.
Okay, you're not a man if you think you're a man. And I didn't say pretending, or if I did, I shouldn't have said pretending. Let me amend.
playing.
Okay, I don't know exactly what he's talking about. May have been from just before the camera started rolling. I don't know, but it is in the mind. Gender is. Again, there are physical aspects to all of this and biological aspects to all of this and everything. All of that is true. But Ben Shapiro doesn't want to accept any of those things. Ben Shapiro wants to toss it all out, and regardless of what he says here, he wants to make the lives of the trans community more miserable. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Just keep listening here.
Okay, I said a boy who thinks he's a girl. That's the usual phraseology I use. Not playing. I usually say a boy who thinks he's a girl or a girl who thinks he's a boy, which is technically what we're talking about here. As far as the actual psychological issues at play, it used to be called gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now they call it gender dysphoria. The idea...
Oh, so he does seem to understand the concept of people being trans. Okay, go on.
Be called gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder. Now they call it gender dysphoria. The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. You have to be kidding me. He's pretending to have the evidence on his side. Like, people who don't agree with that are absolutely crazy. Sex is absolutely, most definitely malleable to some degree, obviously. Or he wouldn't be bitching 24/7 about people getting surgeries and everything else. And second, gender is malleable. It does change. Is it something that we can personally change, that I can change? Like, hey, I'm just going to decide that I'm a woman tomorrow. No. That's not something that I personally can do because I'm not a woman. I'm a man. But some people come to find that they are a man, but biologically are female, or vice versa. That happens. So what he's saying here is simply false. And he's saying it authoritatively, like he knows what he's talking about.
That sex or gender are malleable is not true.
Yes, it is.
Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be.
Now, he's not maybe denying humanity, quote unquote, whatever that means. I guess you would have to kind of break it down and talk about what that actually means, what that phrase means, to deny humanity. But he's definitely making the lives of trans people more miserable, and he's going to give an example himself in a second of exactly how he does that on a daily basis.
You're still a human being, and you're a human being with an issue that I wish you Godspeed in dealing with in whatever way you see fit.
No, he doesn't.
But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your...
So I guess he's just denying the distinction between gender and sex here. In a second, he starts getting into abortion and how wrong it is and everything. It's just absurd on every level. Fascinating, but absolutely absurd. Ben Shapiro, in the solitude of his own home or whatever, with his wife and his kid or whatever, I don't give a shit what he believes or thinks or whatever. I don't care. I couldn't possibly care less. But when he starts trying to change public policy to reflect his personal beliefs, That's when I start to have a problem. When he starts taking people's rights away, when he starts taking away people's dignity and their choice to do what they want with their lives, that's when I have a problem. So right now he's framing it as though you are trying to force him to agree with you personally in his head, just in the privacy of his own home, when he's in bed at night reading his books or whatever with his wife sitting next to him and she's reading her book, because I imagine that's what they do. You know, they got the little sleeping cap and they're sitting there in their beds, their pajamas. Hell, maybe they have 2 twin beds. I can see that for Ben Shapiro. Totally, right? Ben and his wife. And they're sitting there, each reading with little reading glasses on, reading a different copy of a book. I would imagine his wife would be reading Little Women, but I think Little Women is a pro-feminist book, right? So it wouldn't be that. Anyway, the point is, when you're in the privacy of your own home, I don't care what you think, Ben, but he wants to frame it up like that's the problem. Like, I want you to admit to yourself and to your wife and your kid and everybody when you're alone that blah, 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 whatever. No, I have a problem with your public policy positions and the fact that this dude has a lot of political sway. Holy shit, does he have a lot of political sway. And aside from the political sway that Ben Shapiro has, he is influential in the sense that he can make people around him, other college students that are listening, or high schoolers, or otherwise gullible people, to believe the things that he says and spread it. It manifests as hate against others. So he wants you to think, well, what he's doing is he wants to frame it as though he's being victimized because you're trying to force him to believe something. I don't give a shit what you believe. It's all the other stuff that I have a problem with. And he knows that. He's going to point it out in a second.
Answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Okay.
Nobody asked him to do that.
But you're still saying these kids should not be accepted because they don't really fit in either place? They can't just
I'm saying that the Boy Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Yes, and what I'm saying is, why? Why? Why is that a rule? Why are the Boy Scouts exclusively for boys? Why is the Girl Scouts exclusively for girls? Can't we set up a system where it's desegregated or whatever? Back in the 1940s and 1950s, somebody says, why do we have to live in a system where black people and white people go to different schools? It's as though he's saying, in a similar circumstance, well, that's labeled the white school. So, of course, black people can't go to the white school because it's in the name. That's basically what he's saying here.
Scouts have a standard. You must be a biological boy to be a Boy Scout. You have to be a boy to be a Boy Scout.
Where's that written, though?
In the name Boy Scouts.
Yeah, so it's a charisma contest. What she was saying was, where is that a rule? Why is it a rule? Can we question that rule? Why does anybody care? Why can't girls be in the Boy Scouts? Why can't we change it to the Scouts? Why is that such a problem? And Ben Shapiro, instead of actually addressing the serious root of the question, is making a joke out of it. Because again, debates are charisma contests at their heart. Let's see, everyone's laughing. Oh, that was hilarious. That was such a good one-liner he had there. And they're all clapping.
Because this is a very because for all of human history, boy meant boy and girl meant girl.
Okay, fine, great, fantastic. They can still mean that, and we can still have people who are trans, and we can desegregate the Boy Scouts by gender. I don't understand what the problem is. What he's saying right now is a pithy one-liner. I think that's a word, pithy, right? It's a pithy one-liner, but it doesn't actually address the problems or the questions at issue here. It doesn't really change anything at all. doesn't really even make any sense in the context of the questions being asked.
I did not mean girl.
17 though, like people are very more saying it's culture.
And if I
It's really hard to understand what she's saying.
boy did not mean girl.
17 though, like people are very more saying it's culture.
And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose? Okay, if I redefine our terms.
I think what she said was in different cultures, people had different ideas of what like gender was and stuff like that. I'm assuming that's what she said based on his response.
No, yes, that's right. Men and women are a completely different thing. This is true. Have you ever met a man or a woman? They're completely different.
Completely different thing. You can't just say you're a cat. It's not a thing. It's genders. It's not saying you're.
Okay, why is that? I don't understand. Why? Okay, let me ask you this. Okay, I won't ask you how old. I will ask you how old you are. Okay, because you're young enough that it's probably not insulting to ask you. So.
I'm 22.
Oh, this is the traditional, trans age thing.
So I'm probably a bit naive, right?
No. Why aren't you 60? Why aren't you 60?
Our age is a physical attribute about us that is immutable, that changes with time with us. There is no trans age, and comparing being trans to wanting to be a different age or believing you're a different age or whatever is a complete misrepresentation of the arguments or the position or whatever at play here. And people are like laughing at her. Ben Shapiro has had all kinds of time to sit around and think up arguments against this stuff because he came here planning to debate this subject with somebody. That's why there's a microphone in the audience. She probably didn't expect to be in this situation. So she doesn't have a witty retort lined up the way Ben Shapiro does for most things.
And why can't you identify as 60? What is the problem with you identifying as 60?
He's still basing this whole thing off the premise that sex and gender are the exact same thing and they're completely immutable, and that's simply not the case. I mean, he can believe it's the case all he wants, but it's not scientific. And he doesn't really care if it's scientific. It's really a religious thing for Ben Shapiro. It's part of his religious belief that, men shouldn't wear women's clothing and vice versa because it's in the Old Testament or it's in Jewish writings. I'm pretty sure it's in Jewish writings, right? So right now, he is trying to give people the impression that he has science on his side. But if he didn't, it wouldn't matter. He'd hold this position anyways.
It's not the same as gender. You can't just.
You're right. Age is significantly less important than gender.
Okay, we're not talking about importance. We're talking about how comparable they are.
You can't magically change your gender.
No, I can't. He's right. I can't, personally. I can't magically change my gender. I don't know anybody who can magically change their gender. I know a lot of trans people who probably wish that they could so that they weren't trans anymore because people like Ben Shapiro make their lives miserable. Nobody is claiming you can magically change your gender. But it's like he's denying that trans people are real at all? Is that like what he's doing? I think he's pretending that just like being trans is fake.
You can't magically change your sex. You can't magically change your age.
You can't change your age, but you can change your sex to some degree. I mean, you can't change chromosomes yet, but at some point I believe science will be there. Maybe. I mean, who knows? Would that change Ben's position? Would that change his mind if we could change that stuff? Of course not. Because again, this is based on religious belief. It's not based on science or any of that stuff. It's based on his personal religious belief. That's it.
You can still legally change it. People recognize.
You can't legally change your age, by the way.
Nobody said you could legally change your age. Again, charisma contest. That's what it's all about. Charisma contest.
Obviously, you can change your name, you can change your sex, you can change your identity.
Just because you can do things legally doesn't mean that they are correct biologically. You could do lots of things in the past that were incorrect biologically.
Wait, it's biologically incorrect to change your gender identity on your driver's license or whatever, that's biologically incorrect? What the hell are you talking about? What he meant to say was immoral, but he's saying biologically incorrect instead of immoral because he knows he would get a lot more pushback if he said immoral. See how he's framing things in a different way so as to get less pushback, so he doesn't tip his hand and make it more obvious what he believes and what he's doing? There's a cat trying to get up here.
Correct legally. For a long period of time in the United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it okay. Skinner versus Oklahoma, Justice.
Okay, so yeah, Ben Shapiro's a lawyer. He went to law school and thus knows a whole bunch of legal cases. But he was talking about morality. Is it moral to change your gender on your driver's license? I don't see why anybody would care, why it's Ben Shapiro's business. What Ben Shapiro is referring to is other people sterilizing other people who did not consent to it. That's what he's referring to right now. It's a completely different discussion. Step back and listen again here. This cat is, in the way. All right, there you go.
United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it okay. Skinner versus.
Yeah, that's a violation of bodily autonomy. A trans person identifying as a gender that does not match their sex is not a violation of bodily autonomy. But again, he's conflating them. See how he's doing this? He's trying to frame this up as though they're the same thing. They're both equally immoral and both equally ridiculous. It's immoral to change your age and ridiculous to change your age. You can't do that. It's immoral and illegal and wrong and impossible to, do any of the stuff that he's trying to frame it up as. He's trying to conflate things. He's mixing them together.
Versus Oklahoma, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision.
Well, great. Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision. Fantastic. I don't know what that has to do with anything. That's a bodily autonomy argument. Everybody in this room stands against homeless people. Is that who it was? Homeless people being sterilized by force. At the end of this video, though, you'll come to find that Ben Shapiro is actually in favor of sterilizing people by force.
Biologically and correct legally. For a long period of time in the United States, sterilization of the mentally ill took place. That didn't make it.
Oh, he's mentally ill, not homeless.
Okay. Skinner versus Oklahoma, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes wrote the decision.
Right. I still don't understand.
Again, charisma contest. It's all about who looks the coolest and the best and the smartest, blah, blah, blah. And now what she's saying is being drowned out by claps.
It's not a matter of open-minded and accepting. I want them to get treatment that they see fit, but that's not involved.
No, he doesn't.
Involving me. The idea behind the transgender movement as a civil rights movement is the idea that all of their problems would just go away if I would pretend that they were the sex to which they claim membership. That's not.
Okay, well, I don't think anybody is really claiming that they're a different sex, quote unquote. The group of people who actually get surgeries or take hormones or whatever is extremely small. It's almost nobody. But, okay.
The idea that all of their problems would just go away if I would pretend that they were the sex to which they claim membership. That's nonsense.
Okay, I don't think that, once again, he's conflating what he personally believes in his own head, in the privacy of his own home. He's conflating that with his position on public policy, trying to change public policy to be less accepting and more hostile to, the trans community.
The transgender suicide rate is 40%. It is 40%. And according to the Anderson School at UCLA, it makes no difference. There's a study that came out last.
You see, he's already prepared. He already has these statistics and data and everything. He came into this ready for this debate. She did not. And is this stuff even true? I've learned not to trust a word out of Ben Shapiro's mouth. Ever. He's a completely untrustworthy person. Look literally everything up. Even if it's a straightforward, trivial thing. Don't believe a word out of his mouth unless you look it up. If he says the sky is blue, just find out for yourself.
According to the Anderson School at UCLA, it makes no difference. There's a study that came out last year. It makes no difference, virtually no difference, statistically speaking, as to whether people recognize you as a transgender person or not.
Okay, so the claim and real problem here is the fact that there's a lot of dehumanizing behavior and language, and there's a lot of hate and violence perpetrated against the trans community by, I don't know, people who like Ben Shapiro, for example. I'm not, not just him, obviously, but he's a good example of somebody who spreads hate about this group of people, gets other people to hate or to spread hate to this group of people. Maybe he doesn't personally attack any specific trans person in his life. Maybe he doesn't even know any trans people, but the people that listen to him do. And they make people's lives miserable. That is, at least in part, why the suicide rate is as high as it is.
Suggests there's a very high comorbidity between transgenderism, whatever that mental state may be, and suicide. That has nothing to do with how society treats
them. Do you think it could be because of they're bullied at school?
No, I don't think that. I do not think that the discrepancy. I do not think the discrepancy. First of all, I'm against bullying of any sort. Okay, the idea that somebody would beat somebody up is terrible. Okay.
Oh, isn't that fascinating? So he said he's against bullying of any sort, and then he specified a sort that he was against. By doing that, this is all how he frames up his propaganda. By specifying what kind of bullying he's against, he's specifying what bullying is. Says he's against bullying of any sort. The idea that somebody would beat somebody else up is horrible. But attacking them verbally, making fun of them, laughing at them, none of that stuff is off the table, right? Because that's not bullying in his mind.
Okay, as somebody who's viciously bullied in high school, I'm not a fan of bullying. But the idea that the normal suicide rate across the United States is 4%. The suicide rate in the transgender community is 40%. The idea that 36% more transgender people are committing suicide because people are mean to them is ridiculous.
Again, don't believe a single statistic that he gives. I don't know that any of this is true. I'm extremely skeptical about every word out of his mouth. Either way, for the sake of argument, I suppose we can go with what he's saying here. So he's saying if he wasn't spreading hate and dehumanizing people and trying to pass public policy that makes people's lives more miserable, if he wasn't doing all of that stuff, then it would lead to lower outcomes like that. That's what he's saying, right? I think that's just a belief. I don't think he has any reason to hold that belief, any reason to take that position, no evidence to back it up of any sort. But okay, let's keep listening.
6% more transgender people are committing suicide because people are mean to them is ridiculous. It's not true, and it's not backed by any science that anyone can cite. It is.
See, that's interesting. It's not true. That's a direct claim. And it's not backed by any science. Wait, so is it... This is the difference between not true, true, and false. None of those three things are the same. Not true and false are not the same things. So what he's claiming, he's slipping it in here. He says that is false. People would not, I'm trying to say this in a more tactful way, people would not check out as much if Ben Shapiro would stop acting the way he does and trying to affect public policy so as to hurt the trans community. That's his claim. People would not do it. It's a positive, direct claim that he's making right now. And then he says, I have no evidence to believe otherwise. Those are two completely different positions, two completely different things. That's the difference between not true and false. He doesn't have any evidence to affirm what he just said. He just doesn't have any evidence to refute it. And it's very possible that he doesn't have evidence to affirm or refute because he just hasn't even looked for it. Like I said, don't believe a word out of the dude's mouth. Basically, everything he says is framed up in a propagandistic way.
Ridiculous. It's not true, and it's not backed by any science that anyone can cite. It is pure conjecture. In fact, it's not even true that bullying causes...
What he's doing right now is conjecture. He is guessing, and he's accusing the other side of guessing.
For example, in the black community, where the idea is supposedly that America is a racist society, blacks are bullied a lot. Okay, in the black community has significantly lower suicide rates than in the white community. In fact, in third world countries, the
do not believe a word out of his mouth. I don't trust any of it.
Suicide rate is significantly lower than in first world countries. Suicide actually seems to be a privilege of the upper classes if you actually look at it from a financial perspective. So the idea that...
From a financial perspective? What the hell does he mean by that? It's a privilege of the upper classes from a financial perspective? What? What the hell does he mean by that? Seriously, think about what he just said. Suicide is a privilege of the upper classes from a financial perspective. What does he mean by that? And second, this is a really interesting kind of viewpoint on it, right? Think about this, okay? I was listening to somebody recently debate trans people in sports and should sports be segregated and things like that. I'm not going to get into that right now, but think about this, okay? Why are men and women's chess matches segregated? Why can't men and women face off against each other? That's weird, right? In chess? I mean, that's clearly just the fact that a chess match is segregated is making a claim, a direct claim, right? And the direct claim that's being made here is that men and women are different from each other intellectually. They are not as good or something. I don't know. One of them is not as good as the other. Seems to be the inherent claim being made just simply by the act of segregating them. Now, you can look at statistics and see that, yeah, maybe there is a discrepancy between chess ability in men and women. Maybe there is a discrepancy. But how big is the discrepancy really? I mean, is it by like a couple of points? Is it like 2 or 3 points different or something? Like 2% percentage points different? If you look at the number of women who are in a rock band in the United States, you would assume that women were just really bad at playing guitar because there just aren't as many women who lead rock bands, who are lead guitar. You would make that assumption looking at the data the way that Ben Shapiro is looking at this data. But there's no good reason to make that assumption. When you step back and look at the fact that women play the violin and they play cellos and pianos and things in greater numbers than men, and they are, in some cases, far better than some men. Just like some men are far better at guitar than some women. Looking at statistics like this is extremely misleading. And Harvard graduate Ben Shapiro knows that. You can't convince me that he doesn't know that the way that he's looking at statistics is deceitful and confusing and doesn't really represent reality. He has to know that. So let's just step back, listen to the last few seconds in context here.
Black community has significantly lower suicide rates than in the white community. In fact, in third world countries, the suicide rate is significantly lower than in first world countries. Suicide actually seems to be a privilege of the upper classes.
A privilege of the upper classes.
If you actually look at it from a financial perspective.
Seriously. I just don't know what that means, man. I want to know what that means.
So the idea that suicidality is directly a result of people like me saying, no, men are not women and women are not men, it's not true. It's also...
No, you don't have any evidence to make the claim that it's not true. That is absolutely ridiculous. And again, he's conflating what he does in the privacy of his own home, in his own head. I don't give a shit what you're doing up there, Ben. I give a shit what policy you're trying to affect and how you're trying to dehumanize other people. Like I said, in a second, he's going to move on to abortion. It gets really wild.
I think it doesn't impact their identity at all or their depression or how they feel about themselves.
I think
Do you think the way that you treat them impacts their the way they feel about themselves, I think is what she just said.
Also,
Do you think it doesn't impact their identity at all or their depression or how they feel about themselves?
I think the idea that you're going to sacrifice the entire society's proper definition of sex.
Oh, okay. So it's okay if some people suffer terribly, if they are adversely impacted by the way that you treat them because you're treating them like shit and you're making public policy to dehumanize them and take their rights away. That's justified. That's totally A-okay. Because I have a definition of gender and sex that I want to stick to, and I believe that society should use my definition of gender and sex rather than the one that science uses, which, by the way, doesn't match what Ben Shapiro was saying. Even at this time, 6 years ago, it didn't.
Because you think that there is in legal terms, somebody with an eggshell skull, meaning that somebody who has a pre-existing condition that makes them more susceptible to criticism.
I'm sorry, what?
That is not a way to run a society.
What? What the hell did he just say? You have an eggshell skull? I feel like I'm saying something really offensive right now. What did he just say, and what did it mean? You have an eggshell skull, which means you're more susceptible to criticism? I don't understand.
Condition that makes them more susceptible to criticism, that is not a way to run a society. You can't.
Okay, he again, he's saying it authoritatively. It makes no sense at all.
Sacrifice truth because some people are going to actually suffer because of the truth.
Well, see, that's the thing. He hasn't established anything that he said so far is truth. He's established that it's his moral belief. Nothing more, nothing less. Science does not back his position, again. So there's no trueness about what he's saying right now.
Plus, there's no evidence whatsoever that the suicide rate would go down in the transgender community in any marked way.
Oh, there's no evidence that people's lives would get better if you stop treating them like shit, so we're just going to keep treating them like shit. That's what he just said, really. Think about that. Think about what this dude just said. What an insane thing to say. Once again, this is the difference between true, not true, and false. He believes that it is false, actively thinks that it's false, that people's lives would be better if he stopped doing this, when there's no reason to believe this at all. There's no reason for him to hold this position because the science does not back this up in any way. I mean, seriously, think about what he's saying here and how ridiculous it is.
If people just started pretending that men were women and women were men. We're trying that experiment now. We'll find out whether it works. So far, no evidence.
Okay, so he basically just said, we'll find out if people are treated better, will they be less prone to suicide, basically, is what he's saying. We're running that experiment now. We'll find out. I guess that means trans people are treated perfectly in society, or were at this time, and we'll find out if that rate goes down for them. Is that what he's saying? Everything that this dude is saying is ridiculous and absurd, and a lot of the time doesn't mean anything. Really, it means nothing. Half the stuff he says means nothing. And the other half, he's filling in. Like, suicide is a privilege of the upper class in terms of financial markets or something, or in terms of financially, or what was it he said?
You talk to a group of trans people at all instead of this group of, like, white people?
I'm more than happy to talk to a group of any people who will have me, but usually they protest me.
I wonder why. Why do you think people would protest you, Ben? Really? Are you surprised by that? There should be no surprise when he is saying horrific stuff like this. Like, how twisted is some of this, really? He is very obviously trying to warp the position around until it looks completely different than it actually is. He's trying to make people believe that he holds different ideas than he actually does, obviously, right? Wait, let me step back. Listen again.
Group of trans people at all instead of this group of like white people?
I'm more than happy to talk to a group of any people who will have me, but usually they protest me.
Okay, last question about your Planned Parenthood thing. So why do you think it's
Okay, now they're moving into abortion.
not about controlling women's bodies and just about the separate life? Like, after the baby is born, how come more people don't care about them? They don't care where they end up in foster care. They don't care about the mother being poor. Like,
Okay, I do care about the
Okay, so why is it, I think she said, why is it that you care so much about, abortion, but you don't care about them after they're born, basically? You're not pro-life, is the point. You are pro-controlling people's reproductive system, basically, is what I think is the point here.
mother being poor. I do care about foster care.
Okay, but why don't you advocate for that, though? Because
For
Planned
what?
Parenthood is supposed to prevent abortions.
Because Planned Parenthood doesn't prevent abortions. They
They do.
perform hundreds of thousands of abortions a year. They perform 300,000.
Well, both can be true at the same time. I'm sorry. I know I'm stopping every half second here, but I feel like I need to address what he's saying. Let's just step back, listen to what he says again in its entirety.
Okay, but why don't you advocate for that, though? Because
For
Planned
what?
Parenthood is supposed to prevent abortions.
Because Planned Parenthood doesn't prevent abortions. They perform hundreds of thousands of abortions a year. They perform 300,000 abortions a year.
Okay, now this is what I find interesting. I actually went in search of these statistics. How many abortions does Planned Parenthood perform every year? I didn't find a source from Planned Parenthood or any reputable source of any kind, come to think of it. I don't think they even release those numbers. I don't think they're public about how many abortions are performed every year. I think the CDC releases numbers about that stuff, but not Planned Parenthood. Now, Ben is about to cite a statistic that he has, as far as I can tell, no way of knowing. Claims that Planned Parenthood performs 300,000 abortions per year. There's no reason to believe that's true. None.
Prevent abortions. They perform hundreds of thousands of abortions a year. They perform 300,000 abortions a year. They're the leading abortion mill in the United States.
Evidence for that, though.
That they perform 300,000 abortions a year from Planned Parenthood. That's my evidence.
No. I looked. I didn't see any of that. She said, where's your evidence for that? From Planned Parenthood. No. See, this is what I'm talking about. He can just make shit up and claim it's a fact, and just like that, people believe him. Because he's speaking authoritatively and pretending to be, somebody who has facts and information when he simply does not. Or the facts that he has, he's making them up. Just straight up making this stuff up. Seriously.
They don't dispute that. No one disputes that.
And that's the trick right there. They don't dispute that. No one disputes that. Well, that's the first, and I've heard of it. Do they actually say that? Planned Parenthood? I looked around. I couldn't find it. Not disputing it and putting that information out there for people to have are two different things. Maybe they don't even know you made the claim. You know what? I'm claiming Ben Shapiro has 10 kids in his basement that he kidnapped from Central Park over the past 5 years. He's not disputing it, so that just leads me to believe that it's true. I have no other choice, right? He isn't disputing it. That's exactly what he's doing right now. Listen again.
That they perform 300,000 abortions a year from Planned Parenthood. That's my evidence. They don't dispute that. No one disputes that.
Like birth control and
They don't dispute that. No one disputes that. Well, maybe they didn't hear it. Again, I looked. I didn't see it.
I'm not anti-birth control.
I know.
Birth control is extraordinarily cheap.
That provides affordable birth control, which would in turn.
Okay, they're not the only people in America who provide affordable birth control. You can go get a pack of condoms down at the local CVS for $12.
Sure, yeah, but he's kind of refusing to accept the point that, A, Republicans do want to take birth control away. That is on the agenda, and I'll prove that to you in a second. And B, most of what Planned Parenthood does is birth control, is giving people the ability to control their own reproductive system, their own reproductive rights. Now, I said I would prove to you that Republicans have a vetted interest in taking away birth control. Let me do just that. Hang on. Let me find the clip here. I have it. I know I do. This is, I get an interviewer. You can't call him a reporter because he isn't. He's an interviewer who is from the Catholic Church and is interviewing Jackie Eubanks, who is a Trump-endorsed candidate for office in Michigan. I think she lost. This is from mid-May 2022. And this interviewer is Michael Voris. Listen to this.
You're a faithful Catholic, meaning you believe everything the church teaches?
Yes.
Everything?
Yes.
Everything?
Yes.
So you are, you see that the use of contraception is against natural moral law?
Yes.
Is destructive, a doorway to abortion?
So this is, just for a little bit of a cultural context, this is right before Roe v. Wade was undone, but right after the draft decision had been leaked. So everybody knew Roe v. Wade was about to be erased from existence, and the people you see on screen here were ecstatic. They were super excited and looking for the next step, their next opportunity, the next thing they were going to do. And what's the next thing they're going to do?
And all that and everything else.
Yes.
You see the whole, everything going on with Roe, for example, right now, and all the left, becoming completely uncorked, losing their minds. The question, they're saying they're coming after your gay marriage next. They're coming after your birth control after that and everything else. Well, you know what? Yeah. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. So
this is the far right. This is now, unfortunately, the entire Republican Party is far right. There is no center right anymore, really. My brother used to be center right, and then he took a hard right turn, went into La La Land, and then he, I think, moved away from politics a lot and kind of got his head clear. That's what it seems like to me. I mean, I didn't talk to him for a long time because of his position on... let me rephrase. He didn't talk to me for a long time because he thought I was some left-wing nutcase or something. Because he was going so far down a right-wing path, seemingly. That's how it appeared to me, at least. So anyways, there is no far right, there is no center right anymore. This is the far right. This is Ben Shapiro's position. This is everybody's position on the right. Pretty much. If they're pro-life, they almost certainly hold this position too, unless they're one of 16 center-right people remaining. If Ben Shapiro is claiming that he is not opposed to birth control, he's simply lying. He's simply being deceitful until the time comes that he doesn't need to be anymore.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. So we need to make a plain statement of fact, which is the reason why the West is great is because Western civilization's underpinning is Christianity.
Mid-May 2022, people, not that long ago, okay? Trump-endorsed candidate for office. Did she win? I don't remember if she won or not. Let's see. Who was this? Jackie Eubanks. Let's find out if she won her. Jackie Eubanks Ballotpedia. No, she didn't win. Apparently, she ran in the Republican primary. She got 4,500 votes to the runner, or to the actual winner, Jay DeBoyer's 7,700 votes. So she got 29%, he got 49%, basically. And Jay DeBoyer won. Ultimately, the Republican won in that election. It just wasn't her. But she was a Trump appointee. Anyway, they do want to take birth control away. I mean, the far right. They do. They have all along.
You cannot have a successful society outside of the Christian moral order. And
that is a psychotic thing to say.
things like abortion and things like gay marriage are outside of the Christian moral order, and they lead to chaos and destruction and a culture of death, which is why we're seeing that today. We have abandoned the Christian moral order as a nation, and we are reaping that destruction.
How do you answer the local press person who might be your age and just sees you as some loony that she wants to take away your birth control?
She's a loony. She is definitely a loony who wants to take away people's birth control. Absolutely. So, yeah, how do you answer that?
Well,
in the state of Michigan.
Sure. So I guess we have to ask ourselves, would that ever come to a vote in the Michigan State Legislature? And if it should, I would have to side with it should not be legal. And
so she's saying how she would respond if asked, and the answer is, I'd have to be honest. Right? Well, I would hope so. But she's being pretty honest right now, right?
I think that people believe that birth control is it's better, like you said, because, then you won't get pregnant and you won't need to have an abortion. But I think that it gives people the false sense of security that they can have consequence-free sex, and that's not true and it's not correct.
Wow. Okay, fantastic. See, this is the real position. She's outlining it for us. She's explaining why the right doesn't want birth control. This is actually really valuable. I totally forgot she went into it here.
And it's not correct. Sex ought to be between one man and one woman in the confines of marriage.
And open to life.
And open to life, absolutely.
Ideally, the evangelical and or Catholic position really is what the Duggars did. Have as many as you can. Have them until you can't have them anymore, basically. So, if Ben Shapiro is going to stand up here and pretend that he doesn't, oppose birth control or whatever, he's full of shit. Yes, he does. As a far-right extremist, as the far-right extremist that he is, he does. I mean, and you know what? If he doesn't, he sure as hell could have fooled me. He's been supporting candidates and endorsing people and endorsing positions that look an awful lot like anti-birth control positions. Endorsing candidates that are anti-birth control. I don't know what else to do with that. And anti-gay marriage, too, for that matter. Sorry, so let's step back a little bit here.
Provides affordable birth control, which would in turn...
Okay, they're not the only people in America who provide affordable birth control. You can go get a pack of condoms down at the local CVS for $12.
Yeah, well, that's not affordable. What we mean is free birth control, actually. Whether Ben Shapiro likes this fact or not, there are always, in a society built like ours, there are always going to be people on the bottom rung of this society. Because that's how this system is structured. It's built to have a bottom and a top. If you have people that have $1 million in the bank, you're going to have people that have nothing in the bank too. That is the nature of the system that we live in. Now, the people who have nothing in the bank, whether he likes this fact or not, are more predisposed to having unintended pregnancies. They are more predisposed to that. Ben Shapiro wants to blame other people for all of this stuff and say, well, they should have just been more careful. It's all about personal responsibility. Okay, well, you can feel that way if you want, but it doesn't change the fact that we have, 5, 10, 15% of society who makes below a certain amount, who are basically living in poverty and are predisposed to having unwanted pregnancies, like a lot. So you can scream about personal responsibility all you want. That doesn't change the fact that we're in this situation right now. And as a government, the United States, or any government should have an interest in making the lives of its people, the lives of its its members or its whatever. Oh my God, there's a word for this. What do people call it? As a government, the countrymen, I don't even know what the word is. Anyways, every government should make sure that the people within it are living as healthy and productive a life as possible. That should be the goal. In fact, that should be the entire point of a government. Citizens, that's the word. Jesus Christ, why couldn't I think of the word citizens just now? Every government should care about that. That should be the goal. Make their lives at least not miserable, if at all possible.
It's great. People need medication too.
Yes, and it's true that most forms of birth control are also extraordinarily cheap on an annualized basis. Unless you have a severe problem, most birth control...
Well, unless you have a severe problem, it's very cheap. Well, guess what, Ben? A lot of people, we're talking, I don't know, 3 to 5% maybe, have a severe problem. And 3 to 5% may not seem like that many, but there will always be that 3 to 5% on the bottom rung of society that's suffering. As a government, there's a responsibility there to make it better for those 3 to 5%. And when you're dealing with 330 million people in the United States, and what is 3 to 5%? Let's say 5% of 330 million people. What is that? That's, wait, I'm going to get this. Give me a second. Somewhere in the vicinity of 16 million, right? I think. 16 million people, give or take. That's a lot of people. Holy Christ on a cracker. 16 million people. That's 5% of the United States. And it's most definitely more than that live in extreme poverty. Actually, let's just see. What percent of the U.S. lives in poverty? 11.6%. 11.6% lives in poverty. So that would be about 38 million people live in poverty. So yeah, your definition of cheap and their definition of cheap may not be the same, Ben.
Is very cheap and readily available. And I'm not against people going and getting that from Planned Parenthood. As you may have noticed, I'm mostly against abortion. If you want to go to Planned Parenthood and get a contraceptive, go for it. I don't care. I do care when you start killing babies. This is a problem for me.
Yeah, that's not what's happening. Again, Ben wants to frame things up in a dishonest way that's not representative of reality. Planned Parenthood is not, quote-unquote, killing babies. It's an emotionally charged phrase, and he knows that. Dude went to Harvard Law School. Okay, I know what's involved in going to a law school. It's not easy. You can't tell me that this dude is an idiot. He's in dumbass mode right now, for lack of a better term. He's pretending to be a moron. He's in moron mode, I guess.
But what about in rape and incest situations?
Okay, so this is
So now she's trying to clarify his positions. Would you be okay with it in that case?
Here's the question.
It's different, yes.
I mean, this is a long conversation. I'm enjoying it, actually, which is why I'm allowing you to stay. But the question of rape and incest, first of all, important to note, rape and incest are not only a vast minority of abortion cases.
No, they're not.
They're an extraordinarily low percentage of
No, they're not.
abortion cases. So if we can first stipulate...
No, they're not. They are not an extraordinarily low percentage of those cases. This drives me insane. That's the thing, Ben. They're not. And neither are ectopic pregnancies. This stuff has to be dealt with. Okay? And you go to somebody to get an abortion to deal with that. You must. It's a matter of life and death sometimes. Let me just put it this way. I know multiple people whose lives were at risk if they didn't get an abortion. Multiple people. That's just anecdotal. But the statistics back it up too.
That all the other abortions are bad, then we can talk about that other one. Can we do that?
No. All the other abortions are not bad. First of all. And second, the conversation she was trying to have was about this. He's trying to deflect so he doesn't have to answer that question. But once again, this is how he builds. This is his debate tactic. This is how he does it. And this is why I don't like doing debates.
The other abortions bad, or those?
It's kind of a sleazy way of doing it, right? It's a little bit sleazy. Kind of a scumbag method of winning a debate, seems to me. It's a charisma contest, plain and simple.
An extraordinarily low percentage of abortion cases. So if we can first stipulate that all the other abortions are bad, then we can talk about that other one. Can we do that?
No.
Are all the other abortions bad, or are those ones okay? And you're just using this as an excuse to make the other one.
It's not an excuse. It's trying to clarify his position.
It's okay.
They're all okay.
Ah, good. Someone who's honest. So,
Oh, my God. Here we go.
who's the honest?
I mean, he's trying to deflect. That's what I would have said in the moment, probably. Well, honestly, I may not have thought of it in the moment. But that's what he's doing. He's trying to deflect. He's trying to ignore the real issue here. The real issue that she was asking about is, are you okay with that in those cases? And his answer is, well, let's just talk about the other things first. I don't want to talk about that right now.
This fellow who's okay, yay, honest people. Good. I like the honesty. Okay, so all abortions are okay. So, a sign that I can't read because it has lots of words on it. Okay, so I have one question for you and one question only on abortion. Does the canal magically confer personhood?
He is so cringy, dude. I would rather him just call it a wet-ass P word. Is that what he said? You guys remember that? Like forever ago? He's talking about WAP, Cardi B's song. Is that who sang it? Cardi B? And Ben Shapiro did this whole video about wet-ass P words and stuff. It was just terrible.
Answer, does the magically confer personhood? Yeah, raised hands are okay. You, sir.
No, the first breath does.
No. See, this is the thing Ben Shapiro is trying to do. He's trying to blur the line. In reality, it's hard to know. Somewhere between conception and, the 39th week and 6th day, somewhere between those 2 points, personhood is conveyed. It's, what is it? The Ship of Theseus? Is that the name of the old philosophical problem? Well, just make it more simple. If you have a shovel that your dad gave you and you don't want to lose this shovel because it means a lot to you, and the shovel's handle breaks, so you replace the handle, and then the bottom part of it gets a dent in it, so you replace the bottom part. Is it still the same shovel that your dad gave you? You've replaced everything on it so that it's an entirely new shovel, but at what point was it not your dad's shovel anymore? Right? And the Ship of Theseus is the same thing. At what point does a baby become a baby? At what point does it go from cells to an actual person? And Ben Shapiro wants to pretend like people to the left hold the position that it's just a clump of cells up until the 9th month, up until the moment it takes a breath or the moment that it comes out. Nobody holds that position. Nobody. The Supreme Court decided that it was the moment that it could survive outside the mother on its own, which is about 20 to 25 weeks, somewhere in that vicinity. I suppose I like that. I mean, I think I'm okay with that. That's a pretty decent position to hold, viability, right? I think I like Roe v. Wade, where they stand, or where they stood, not anymore. Casey and Roe were good Supreme Court decisions. At some point, it does become a human being. It's just we've got a big, long 40-week stretch to place that marker. But there's something called a bright line rule in law. God, I'm really bad at explaining these things, but I believe the bright line rule is like when something is muddy, when you're looking at a spectrum, you find a place on that spectrum and place a bright line on it. Like marriage being between two consenting adults. That's the bright line. Two consenting adults. We're okay with marriage between two consenting adults. That throws out, polygamy or bestiality or any of the other stuff. Two consenting adults should be able to do whatever they want to do. That's a bright line rule. And you have to draw a bright line for abortion too. The bright line drawn by the Supreme Court was when the baby reaches viability, or when the fetus reaches viability, which is about 25 weeks, 20 to 25. But Ben here is going to pretend that doesn't exist, that there is no bright line. Everything is muddy and relative and confusing. And his bright line, his rule, if you will, is when you stand up to use the bathroom, there's a third person in the room with you.
The first breath confers personhood. Okay, so if the baby is in the womb and is...
I mean, as if he hasn't debated this stuff into the ground in law school. Trust me, this stuff is debated into the ground in law school. He knows his position on this stuff, and he knows the other position, the other side, and he knows exactly what tricks he's pulling right now. But okay.
exactly the same size and has not yet breathed, and you take a knife and you stab the baby in the head, a fully formed 9-month-old baby, it is not a human. The only thing that makes it a human is when it takes a breath. It has to independently breathe.
I mean,
That's not what anybody believes. He was just giving that as an answer for the sake of argument, obviously. He was just trying to get Ben to get on with it and tell us what he believes. But he's so, like, slippery and weaselly with everything, you know? You can't get a straight answer out of the dude. And everything that you say in a debate with Ben Shapiro, he tries to use against you. Again, it's all charisma contest. That's why I would never debate him, probably. I don't know. Maybe I would.
Human. The only thing that makes it a human is when it takes a breath. It has to independently breathe.
I mean, I'm going to be honest. I'm going to stick to it, yeah, because I'm also pro-capital punishment and pro-selective.
Oh, so the dude that said that is pro-life, it sounds like.
Pro-capital punishment and pro-selective suicide. So I'm going to stick with it.
Selective suicide? Yeah, I assume you mean elective suicide.
I mean, elective suicide.
Elective suicide. Okay.
Yes, I'm not going to make someone commit suicide.
Okay, that's good, because that wouldn't be suicide, it would be homicide. So
Clever. Very clever. Again, charisma contest. That's what this is.
So that, by the way, I'm for capital punishment too, because people who kill people should be killed. But babies who have not killed people should not.
Okay, I agree. Except we disagree on where personhood is conferred, right? Personhood, in the Supreme Court's opinion, up until it was controlled by extremist nutcases, was viability, when it could live outside the womb. And I like that. I think it's a hard thing to decide. It's a hard position to kind of adjudicate or whatever. So without a better, like, bright line, I guess I'll go with their bright line. Why not? It's a decent one.
And this is my basic position on abortion. So let me but I'll get your answer because you're the one who asked the question. Are you willing to stipulate that all the other abortions are bad, just rape and incest bother you?
No! Why does he keep jumping back desperately, trying to avoid just answering the damn question? We're just trying to get your position on these issues, and he refuses to answer the questions.
I mean, no, I believe a woman should have the right to move
Got it. So it's an excuse, right? So it's an excuse so that we can say that, so that we can take the marginal case and then.
Wow, that's a clever way of avoiding just answering the question. Claiming that somebody's using an excuse. She's trying to figure out what he believes.
And say that the marginal case applies to all cases. Okay, that's again faulty thinking. But if you want me to answer
it's not faulty thinking. She's just asking a damn question.
Specifically on rape and incest, here is my basic answer. Rapists should be castrated or killed. You shouldn't kill babies. End of story.
But are they?
Wow, that's actually a psychotic position. Didn't he just say we shouldn't be, like, castrating or we shouldn't be, like, sterilizing people earlier? Didn't he say that just, like, a few minutes ago?
Ever castrated and killed? Most rapists don't even get convicted.
I agree, and that's usually the left side of the aisle because the left side wants to let them out after 5 years in prison.
Isn't it interesting how he did that? Think about what just transpired. Listen to this one more time, okay? He says, I think those people should be castrated or killed. And she says, most of them aren't even caught or convicted. And he says, well, that's your problem, really, because you let them out after 5 years. We're not talking about people who are let out after 5 years. We're talking about people who aren't even caught. See how he's twisting it around to be an argument that wasn't even made and blaming other people for the problems? It's the left's fault, apparently.
Kill babies. End of story.
But are they ever castrated and killed? Most rapists don't even get convicted.
I agree, and that's usually the left side of the aisle because the left side wants to let them out after 5 years in prison.
This is him owning a transgenderism and abortion? This is as bad as him. I mean, again, it's a charisma contest. This is as bad as him saying suicide is a privilege of the wealthy in terms of financial, or what the hell was it he said? I don't even remember now. This is terrible. Like, really, really bad. Ben Shapiro is not an idiot. Why does he play one on TV is my question. And here's the real answer. He is from an extremist branch of religion. He is an extremist Jewish person, just like there are extremist Christians. Apparently there are extremist Jews in the country too. Apparently a lot of them in Israel as well. And he's one of them. So he will literally side with Nazis. Literal, full-blown Nazis. Candace Owens believes all kinds of psychotic stuff and has said all kinds of psychotic stuff about Jews and has defended full-blown, known Nazis. And he employs Candace Owens. She works with him. She appears in videos with him regularly. I just covered one recently. I mean, she's just one example. She gives shelter to and aid and comfort to Nazis. And Ben, in the name of his far-right agenda, in the name of not having gay people be allowed to get married, will side with Nazis. That's psychotic. What is wrong with this dude? Seriously. Anyway, I think that's the end of the clip. We have a few more seconds.
I want them castrated or killed. I'm telling you what my belief is. My belief is not public policy at the moment.
No, but he's pushing for it, and he's well known enough to get things that he wants, put into public policy. That's psychotic. I don't want anybody. That's eugenics, isn't it? Isn't he advocating for something that is internationally considered a war crime? You're not allowed to take people's ability to reproduce away or something. I don't know exactly what the law is, but that is a truly deeply psychotic thing to say. Also, the death penalty, as far as that goes, here's my answer to the death penalty. 4% of people on death row are 100% innocent. They didn't do shit. They didn't do anything. They don't belong there. They don't deserve to be there. They got the wrong guy 4% of the time. Until that number can be 0, I cannot abide by the death penalty existing. It's that straightforward. Until we can be 100% sure we got the right guy every single time, we can't do it for anybody. Anyway. Government's definitely killed innocent people before. That's disturbing as it gets, seems to me.
I'm telling you what my belief is. My belief is not public policy at the moment. But I think, would you agree with me on that one? Can we at least get a little agreement to finish this particular parlay? Okay.
No! The government shouldn't be killing anybody or castrating anybody either, for that matter. The government shouldn't be forcing reproductive decisions on anybody. Those decisions fall into bodily autonomy territory and should be made by the person. The accusation that you've done something bad does not justify taking human rights away from you. You have to be removed from society for other people's safety from time to time to make sure that, you're not hurting somebody else or whatever. You're not at risk of hurting other people. But you shouldn't have your human rights taken away. You still have a right to eat, a right to sleep. You have a right to not be tortured. You have a right to not have your reproductive autonomy taken away from you. I mean, you don't have a right to reproduce necessarily. You just can't have it taken away. You can't be castrated. That's psychotic that Ben Shapiro stands for that. He wants people to be castrated in some cases. What a psychotic position to hold, seems to me.
You should be castrated or killed?
Well, yes.
Okay, good.
No, my God, dude.
Yeah, okay, we agree. Thanks.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, that was Ben Shapiro's... No, I'm sorry. That was the Daily Wire's most popular video. Yeah, maybe not most popular. No, 8.6 million views. Maybe it's just Ben Shapiro's most popular or most viral. I don't know. Anyway, that's psychotic, man. What is wrong with this guy, really? how does somebody come to the conclusions that he's come to? How does a Jewish person side with Nazis the way that Ben Shapiro does? I gave a clear example, but there are a lot more, slightly more ambiguous examples than that with Candace Owens. Joni Cummings, thank you for being a member. My goodness, can Ben Shapiro be even more damp? He seems not to realize how stupid he sounds. That's my opinion. I think he realizes how stupid he sounds, but he has this ability to just kind of smooth it right over, just pretend that it didn't happen. When he's in dipshit mode, when he's pretending to be a fucking moron. I'm sorry. I try not to swear on streams. YouTube does not like that very much. This may be demonetized. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, because there's a lot of talk about abortion and everything, but the dude's in moron mode basically 24/7. He's not an idiot. Why does he play one on TV? Seriously. Anna Grace, I've been listening for so long now. Your voice feels really familiar and calming. When I'm stressed, your channel is one of my favorites. Keep up the great work. Thanks. Save Central Park kids from Ben. Hashtag, yeah. Appreciate it. Ben Shapiro, okay, if there's one thing that people learn in law school, it's argumentation, methods of argumentation, and debate, and logical fallacies. You can't convince me Ben doesn't know exactly what fallacy he's committing here.